Hello. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Thea Aldrich, and I want to welcome you. Thank you to Linaro, to all of the event organizers, sponsors, and all of you for coming this morning. I'm so excited to talk to you today about developer relations. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. It's an incredible aspect of the open source community that really empowers developers and helps them build relationships to build better technology. So it's no secret that open source is eating the world. Open source creates partnerships that push the limits of what's possible by expanding the number of voices at the table and sharing resources across a number of organizations. And we also all know that things are changing within the embedded ecosystem. The rise of better, cheaper hardware and easier access to all the pieces of information that a developer would need to build a smart connected device are all readily available. And so before I go any further, I want to let you guys know that, full disclosure, I'm one of these new people. I come to the Zephyr project, which is part of the Linux Foundation, from the open source geospatial ecosystem. I've been with Zephyr for about 3 months now, and really what happened with my experience in finding the Zephyr project and finding these resources and finding something what I thought was incredibly special and compelling led me to an entirely new career. And so what I want to talk about to you today is the Zephyr project and the developer relations that and activities that we've got going on within the project, but very much from the point of view of myself as I was coming into the project and as I was experiencing all of these different resources. So like I said, I started out in open source geospatial, and I was fascinated by this idea that with volunteers and different data sources, a real accurate map of the world could be made, and something in a level of detail and richness that no one had ever seen before. And over time, I started hearing more and more about the Internet of Things and the way that the Internet of Things was providing incredibly rich, latent data that was able to be incorporated into these maps to really give people some of the most detailed pictures of their environment. And while I was doing that, I started becoming, I dare say, jealous that I was seeing all of these technologies, but I didn't know how to build them myself. I didn't know how I could ever take these pieces and not only make a map, but have information that I cared about flowing in. And so these are my cows. So what I ended up doing was I started trying to build. And I started wanting to experiment with these devices and see if the barrier of entry was really low enough that I could actually do it. And so what I did was discovered the Zephyr project. And while I was working through creating what I lovingly refer to as my cow happiness detector, it's really just a biometric feedback device that I was using to track the location and general well-being of my pet cows. But while I was going through this sort of hobby project, something really incredible started happening. During the day, I was working in geospatial, but at night, my passion was embedded. And we see that a lot within this ecosystem. And everything was great until I tried to start putting things together. And it turns out that it's not quite that simple for someone coming in with very little experience in this community. And one of the problems that I encountered was that I had to start making choices. I had to start deciding what kind of hardware I was going to use, what kind of communication protocols I was going to use, and all of the different pieces, how I was going to put them together, what I was going to put the device in to attach it to the cow. Everything was overwhelming. So as a new developer trying to build something, I encountered some really common problems. Fragmentation in the market. There were a ton of vendor-specific tools that either locked me into a certain way of doing things or locked me into a certain tool set. There was an incredibly high barrier of entry. And there were a lot of solutions that worked, but they were clearly not built with somebody like me in mind. And I knew I needed help. And I knew that it was out there, but I couldn't find it. You know, and I've been working as an open source developer advocate for over 10 years. So I knew that surely there had to be some ecosystem that I could plug in, that I could actually start becoming empowered to build what I wanted to build, to participate in the community the way that I wanted to participate. So what I ended up finding was the Zephyr community. The democratization of these technologies gave me a goal. It gave me a destination. But within the Zephyr project, what I found and what the Zephyr community gave me was the rocket, the fuel, the map, and the owner's manual to actually start putting those pieces together and start being able to realize the products that I was trying to make as a hobbyist. So before I go any further, I want to talk a little bit about the Zephyr project to give a little bit of context. We're a free and open source real-time operating system hosted out of the Linux Foundation. We boast a number of members, including Linaro. We have a very vibrant community. And Zephyr is built with safety and security in mind, specifically for resource-constrained environments, which really fit into the type of device that I was trying to build, which was essentially precision agriculture. And that brings me to the first best practice that I really want to talk about to you today. When I encountered the Zephyr project, it was intentional. And as a professional with experience in open source, it was clear to me from my first encounter with the project that things being done within the project were being done for a reason. The reason was to address those problems that I was encountering. Now, we're not all the way there yet, but it was clear from just the very first cursory look that the fragmentation, the modularity, the licensing and the feature richness was something that I could understand why it was being done, and it was clearly being done for people like me and like you who were trying to do new and innovative things. But again, knowing a solution exists is fundamentally different from being able to implement that solution. And that's the second bit I want to talk about that really made an impact to me within the Zephyr community is documentation opens doors. I have to give a shout out to David Kinder from Intel, who's almost exclusively participated in the documentation of Zephyr. This stuff was transformational for me. So anybody who's building an open source project and trying to support the community, understand that the path that people like me are going to take as they come into this are through the resources you put out online. So these are some of the resources that the Zephyr community had available for me when I came in. And we're working very hard to build those. But one of the things I want to take a moment to shout out is the YouTube videos. You know, I'm not only coming to the embedded ecosystem from geospatial, but I came to geospatial from a non-technical background. So for me, one of the most empowering things was that Zephyr had a YouTube channel, and there were tons of videos online that I could watch, people I could identify with, I could see, I could start understanding what kind of community this was, what kind of people they were, how they were talking to each other, how they were interacting with the technology. And the idea that I could just sit in my living room in my spare time and get an entire education on how to use this product was incredibly powerful. I also want to take a second to thank Linaro for videoing these presentations, because many of the presentations I was watching and I was finding so useful were actually presentations that were at some of these events many years ago. So thank you also to all of the presenters who do those, because in a lot of ways, half of the time if I walk up to you and I've got a big smile on my face, it's because I think I know you, because I've watched all of your stuff. I've seen all your videos, I read your tweets, and I've seen your code. Open source is more than code and documentation, though. Governance matters. Governance within open source can be a make or break endeavor, right? Because oftentimes, open source communities are faced with a number of challenges that they have to balance. There's competing interests. There's priorities that need to be ranked, and people have different ideas and opinions about those. Now, that variety is what makes open source so beautiful and powerful, but it can also, without proper governance, derail or sidetrack discussions and make it really hard for things to go forward. And so one of the things that was, as someone familiar with open source and who understood it, when I encountered the Zephyr project, it was incredibly refreshing to see clear governance documentation. One of the things that I like to point out about the Zephyr project that I think is where there's a lot of thought leadership provided by some of the folks that founded the project is the difference between decision-making in the technical steering committee and the governing board. You know, oftentimes it can be very difficult as a developer because you feel like there's competing business interests that might supersede the work that you're doing, or that there's things happening in the background that you don't know about, that you don't have a say in. And one of the things that was so amazing and so refreshing about encountering the Zephyr project was that you could see that everything had a process. There was a channel to go through if you had an issue. There was clear responsibility and delegation of authority within the project so that resources, time, and energy is spread around. But successful collaborations like this don't just happen on their own. There's a lot that goes into it. And that's the fourth best practice that I want to encourage you all to really focus on as you're moving forward in open source, is that community needs cultivation. These things didn't just happen, right? They were intentional. They were built with a purpose. They were explained to me. And there were also resources and activities that I was able to use as a developer that made a massive difference to me. Now, why would I put up a meeting information? I love the first part of my week. We have a lot of calls in the Zephyr community, and it's one of the things that I really like. And I lurk on almost every one of these with a big smile on my face. Because what I love so much about them is even when there are fierce disagreements about the best technical path forward, the community is able to maintain professional behavior. They're friendly, and at the end of the day, everybody knows that we're working on a common goal for common purposes. I want to invite everybody who's interested. The Zephyr calls are a great way to get introduced to the community if you're not comfortable posting on a mailing list or reaching out in other ways. A lot of times, mailing lists and other resources that are very public can feel like too much attention as a newcomer. And so as a newcomer within the Zephyr project, being able to just quietly listen in on a call and maybe participate if I wanted to or I had something to add was so refreshing and comforting that there were different channels and different mediums that I could actually plug into and participate in a way that I was familiar and comfortable with. But wait, there's more. So within the Zephyr project, we're really trying over the next 6 months to a year to continue to build out these outreach activities. You know, as someone who benefited from them, they're one of the things that I'm the most excited about being able to contribute back to the community. We're going to be doing a number of events over the next few months. We're also starting to introduce language-specific webinars because we realize that we've got community members all over the world that want to hear about Zephyr, that want to learn about Zephyr, and it's going to be easier for them and better for them if we can communicate with people in their native tongue. We're also creating a number of how-to guides. I have to give a shout out to the Bluetooth guys. They have created a number of incredible resources that I love using, that I want to encourage you all to use, but we're seeing other organizations creating these and putting these out and not just telling you about the technical documentation, but showing you from end to end how you deploy this solution. We're also going to be doing a series of product spotlights, so I want to encourage any of you, if you are building with Zephyr, please reach out to us and let us know so that we can spotlight your product and show other developers what they can do. You know, for me, the product spotlight of some of the products built with Zephyr helped me create new ideas that I could then go build. And so even if you don't think that what you're working on is necessarily very interesting, you don't know who in the community it might resonate with very powerfully and inspire them to go out and build. And also conferences and social media. You know, over the last few months, I've gotten introduced to WeChat and a number of other social media channels, and it's been incredibly fun to interact with the developers all over the world. And we're excited to keep that going. And then the fifth best practice I want to talk to you a bit about is diversity. And encourage you not to limit or confine what you think about and what you define diversity as within your project or your organization. Because for me, diversity was one of the things that attracted me to the Zephyr project, but it wasn't diversity in the way that I think a lot of folks immediately assume. So for me, diversity in the Zephyr project had to deal with technology. It had to deal with the number of supported boards that I, knowing nothing, could go to Radio Shack, buy a whole bunch of stuff as they were going out of business, and have a reasonable expectation that there was at least some level of support within the Zephyr community for those boards. The range of architectures that are supported, the number of use cases that Zephyr is being deployed in, the member companies. We've got everything from billion-dollar companies to two-person startups that are able, because of the governance, to sit at the table and have an equal voice within some of their boards. We also have diversity within our board members, and diversity on the board is incredibly important when you're talking about top-level decisions. There's diversity in goals within the Zephyr community. You know, myself as a hobbyist, I have fundamentally different goals when I try to build something than a developer doing so in their day job. But that doesn't mean that we both don't get wonderful resources and abilities from the Zephyr community and the Zephyr project. And it's the ability to have that many goals, that many products, that many use cases, that many types of technology coming in and all interacting together that you start seeing the full richness of the value chain that open source offers. And also the type of contributors. Yes, it's important to have diversity, but don't limit diversity, because diversity is an outcome. Diversity is an outcome of all of the things that you do within your project that's going to attract people, that's going to keep them engaged, and that's going to keep your project going strong moving forward. So I want to encourage you all to join us. That's our WeChat and our Twitter. We are all over the place. And like I said, Zephyr has been one of the most pleasant experiences that I've ever had in open source for these reasons. And I can't thank you all enough, and I want to encourage you to join us, because there is something very special happening with this project, and I would like to invite you all to participate and come along for the ride. Thank you.